Everybody, I'm going to make a video for you today on my home brewing. I've never done this before, I've never uploaded to YouTube at all. Loads of people have been emailing me, texting me saying please do a video. And there are loads of videos on YouTube, but none appear with me appearing in them, so I thought why not, let's give it a go. So behind me you can see my Bulldog brewer, which is my fancy little bit of kit for making my brews. I'm going to try and take you through step-by-step instructions on how to make this beer today, and I've decided to go with a craft ale, because we all like our craft ales now. I certainly do. IPAs, really enjoy them, my mates really enjoy them. They seem to drink more of it than what I do, but I tend to make it and they drink it. But anyway, today we're going to be doing an IPA, 5.7, 5.8%, and we're going to be infusing this IPA with grapefruit. There's a lot of craft ales out there now, IPAs with citrusy infusions. I quite like them, quite a nice dry finish, pleasant to drink, and I'm going to have a go at making one. I've never tried it before, so I don't know how it's going to turn out, but we're going to give it a go. Ingredients I'm using today, mainly dry malt extract. I haven't really got a lot of time this afternoon to use to do an all grain. I do usually do all grain, but because of time limitations, I'm gonna cheat a little bit, and I'm going to use dry malt extract. So technically speaking, is your grain that's already been dried, and the sugar content is ready just to boil in with your hops. But just to add a little bit of infusion, I'm going to start with a crystal malt, and that's what I've got in here at the moment. I'm steeping about 150 grams of crystal malt, nice rich colour, nice smoky smell to it, and that's just going to put a little bit more flavour into the beer. Then once we've steeped those for about half an hour, we're going to throw in about 3.5, 3.7 kilos of dry malt extract. We're going to bring that to the boil on a rolling boil for about an hour and 10 minutes, and then we're going to add our hops. The hops I've chosen for this particular brew, two hops, one called Challenger. For anybody who's home brewing, this is quite a common hop to use, quite a nice pungent flavour. So that is going to be the main hop in this beer, about 70 to 80 grams of that during the boil. And one that I've used before called Golding, which again is again quite a pungent hop, quite florally, quite citrusy, and that's it. That's the two hops I'm going to be using in this simple IPA. The last stage of the boil, to get that grapefruit aroma, I'm going to actually be using proper grapefruit, and I'm going to be peeling this skin, and probably use one to start with. Try not to get as much of the white pith as possible, because that's going to give you quite a lot of bitter taste. And this is rated probably about 40 to 50 IBU bitterness. Again, if you know what I'm talking about, read up on it. There's plenty on YouTube about IBUs and bitter contents and stuff. But we're looking for the citrus flavour on the peel. Nice smell on that, and that should give us enough for first infusion. And then when we dry hop, when we ferment, which I'll show you a bit later, we're going to add another whole grapefruit, the peel of the whole grapefruit, about 3 to 4 days into the fermentation. So we've got our Bulldog brewer set on 64 degrees, which is the temperature I'm looking for steeping this grain. We've got about 6 minutes left to do. I've done about 30 minutes in total at that temperature, and what that's doing is just recirculating the water in the tun over the grain, just trying to rinse a bit of that flavour and a bit of that sugar out of the mash. Fairly simple pump system. Again, I bought this as a second-hand pump system and made it up myself, but this attaches to the tap here. The liquid comes from the tap at a slower rate. You can alter the rate of flow here, but I like to try and do it slowly, and then that forces that back up, and then over the grain. So a couple of days ago I made myself a what's called a yeast starter. Again, you can read up about these on YouTube. Fairly simple to make. We've got all we're effectively doing here is making a small batch of beer. So we've got half a cup of dry malt extract with 2 cups of water. We've boiled it up, we've let it cool down, we've added the yeast, and over a period of a couple of days we keep shaking this to introduce oxygen into the wort, which will give us, if you can see from the bottom, that nice yeast cake under there. I've chilled this right down this morning, and I brought this out a couple of hours ago just to bring this up to room temperature. You don't want to shock the yeast when you add it to your final wort, so it's ideal to bring it up to room temperature, so it's a nice condition to pitch your yeast into your fermentation vessel, which we'll do a bit later on. When we started this, we had about 1 billion yeast cells in here, which I didn't feel was enough to get a good fermentation out of the beer that we're making today. So by doing this, you're bringing the yeast into suspension. It's reproducing, and we're looking for about 2.5 billion cells in this starter. So we've got a lot of yeast here ready to attack all that sugar in that wort and turn it into that percentage that we want. Okay, so the mash is finished. The initial mash on the crystal malt is finished. We're going to just leave that to chill out for a second while we weigh up our hops, and I've already done that in preparation. So we're going to go in with the Challenger hops, about 70 grams of the Challenger hops. I bought these in floral form. You can get these in pellets as well. I prefer to use them in floral form. And to make it easier for cleanup, I use a muslin bag. And these things you can buy for about 20 pence, 25 pence. Fill your hops in there, sling it into your wort, and it just helps the cleanup at the end. Okay, so we're going to switch off our tap. We're going to switch off the pump. Carefully lift this out. Set that on the side. Our sparging plate comes out. Just drop straight back into your sterilised solution. And with the handle, attach the handle back onto the mash tin. And then carefully lift this up. This has got a 2-stage lift up, so you can actually lift it to there if you want to, but we've not got a lot of grain in here. There's only 140 grams of crystal malt. So I'm just going to leave that there to just drip. You can see if I pull it out there, it's just all that liquid is just dripping out. So we'll let that sit there for a couple of minutes, and then we'll add the extract and the hops. Okay, so I've taken out the mash tun, discarded the crystal malt, and what you can see in there is a nice dark coloured liquid that smells absolutely amazing, really smoky, and I think that's going to give a nice finish to the beer. Okay, so for the second stage then, we're going to add our 3.7 kilos of dry malt extract. Now this stuff can be a right bitch, and it can stick everywhere if you get this wet, so ideally you don't want to be making a mess of this. Just make a cut across the top of the scissors, you can see it start coming out already. Take your sterilised paddle and just gradually add this in. Now this will start to clump up as you put this in, so you need to be really stirring this well, because as I say, once this gets wet, this is a real cow to unclump. But hopefully while we're boiling, wow, that smells amazing. hopefully while we're boiling it should help to knock all the lumps out. Before we start the boil, it's always good to take a gravity reading at the start, which determines how much you've actually got in here, how much sugar content you've got in here. I use a refractometer, pretty simple bit of kit to use. Just drop a couple of drops on the little sight screen there. Close it up. Make sure there's no eye bubbles. Have a little look through, and we've got around about 1.045, which I'm pretty happy with that. Bearing in mind that when we boil, this is going to concentrate down even further. So there's probably still a little bit of malt extract in there that's not been stirred up. And then when we sort of take our gravity reading at the end of the boil, we should be looking for around about 1.60, which is our starting gravity reading. So we're not far off that already, which is good. So we're going to kick off the boil. Another final stir. Oh, forgot one thing. Hot bag, all tied up. Drop that in there. That'll float on the top, and that'll infuse while that's boiling. So to set the boil, stick it on, press your temperature button, increase him up to, I go to about 103, 104, just to make sure that we have got a rolling boil. And then once that's hit temperature, it's very important to make sure that you get to your temperature first before you start your timer. I've done that several times before, and I've missed my gravity by a lot. So it's always good getting that practice of doing that first. So it's works roughly about 60, 61 degrees now. It's dropped a little bit in temperature. So we're going to leave that now to bring up to 102, 103. So hot bag in, floating on the top, coming up to temperature. I'm circulating at quite a slow rate here. Probably turn that down a little bit more actually, but that's just making sure that everything gets mixed in. And then we'll come back the last 15 minutes before the end of the boil. We'll put our second stage of hops in and our grapefruit peel. Okay, we're coming up to the end of the boil. We've got about 10 minutes left. I've added the second set of hops into the tun. They're the golden hops, and I've also added the grapefruit peel in there as well, which I have to admit, you stick your nose over the top of it, you get a real nice smell of grapefruit come through already. So I'm hoping I've not gone too much on that, but hey, it's all about experimenting, so we'll see how it goes. So we've got about 10 minutes of that. We're going to then add another 35 grams of the Goldings at switch off, and my dog down there she's fed up already. Look, fed up of me talking. But yeah, we're nearly ready to cool this work down. Okay, so we've just reached the end of the rolling boil. The system is completely shut off, and the boil has stopped. We've got about 22 to 23 litres of liquid in here, so we've lost probably about, I don't know, 4 or 5 litres during the boil. Smells absolutely amazing. It really does smell amazing, that. And what we're going to do is we're just going to drop in the final 35 grams of the Goldings, and that will just sit there for another 15 minutes while the boil's been switched off. Once we're ready, 15 minutes is up, we will hook up the chiller and we'll start chilling the work down. Before I do that, I'm going to take another quick reading of the post-boil. Again, this could be affected because of the temperature. You might want to take another reading after that. But yeah, absolutely bang on. That has shot right up to 1.060, exactly where I wanted it to be. So that is going to be perfect. Okay, so we've now hooked up the wort chiller simply by attaching the hose pipe. In one end, the cold water will go through the circulation pipe, and then it will come out here and exit into the sink. Obviously it's boiling hot water. We've got the temperature off, but I'm using the gauge here just as a reference. At the moment it's saying 88. We want to cool that right down to about 21, 22 degrees. So it's going to take quite a while to do, but ideally the pitching temperature for our yeast is around about 21 degrees. So we'll come back when this is nice and cool. We'll take a final gravity reading. That gravity reading will be the starting reading for our fermentation, and we'll do our calculations based on that. In the meantime, I shall get the fermentation chamber and the rods all set up and sterilised, and we'll be back shortly. Okay, so next stage then, once we've got this wort chilled down, at the moment we're on 26, so not long now, we need to rack it. And to rack it, we need a fermented bucket, a bit like this one, plastic bucket, holds about 25 litres with a screw top. At the moment I'm sanitising the screw top, but when we rack it I'll show you how that works. I have a little invention called the brew jacket, which I imported over from the States. It's basically like a heat exchanger, and it works in the form that a rod attaches to the unit, which again I've got sanitising at the moment. That fits onto the lid and goes through, which is sealed into the beer. At the top here you set your temperature to whatever temperature you want it to. We're going to ferment this IPA out around about sort of 20-21 degrees, probably a little bit lower than that actually, but just to kick it off about 21 degrees, and then probably knock it down to about 19 in a couple of days. Power unit goes into there, and into the other side is a hole for the thermostat. The thermostat comes out and it attaches to the side of the fermenting bin, so that keeps an eye on the temperature inside, and whatever you've set it to on here will fluctuate accordingly. This unit will either heat or it'll either cool. So it's great for if you're doing lagers and you want to lager out at sort of, I don't know, 10-11 degrees. You can just keep knocking this down. The rod will chill down, which will also chill your wort down, and it gets the perfect temperature for your fermentation. Okay, so we're ready to rack the beer. We'll just do a final temperature check. I always tend to do this manually, as well as doing it on the system, because I'm not always 100% sure it's correct. But yeah, that's hitting 20, 25, so that's absolutely perfect for racking now. So we'll discard the turn the hose off. Flip the hose. So what we're looking to do when we transfer this wort into the bin, we're looking to try and aerate this as much as possible. So tap on full flow, get the pump going, and we really want to try and aerate this as much as possible. That just helps the yeast to get going once it's in there, just to oxygenate it a little bit. So as you're doing it, splash it about, move it about. You will try and get as much air as you can in there. So I come up to about 19 litres, 20 litres, which is ideal, because I tend to go over just a little bit, because my kegs only hold about 19 litres when they're full, so you're going to waste a little bit of this. I think we'll shut it off there. I'm pretty happy with that. Turn the pump off. I just want to take another final gravity reading just to be certain that we've got that gravity. Yeah, absolutely perfect. Spot on 1060, just where we want it. I'm going to sanitise sanitised lid. Man's best friend, Vaseline. Just a little bit of that on the seal inside, just to make sure we've got a nice tight seal. In the top of this lid there is a blow-off valve, so instead of having because you've got this unit on here, you can't obviously fit a blow-off valve on the top, so these lids are designed, again sent from the manufacturer, from Brew Jacket, so they've got a blow-off valve which a pipe will connect to, and that will go in some sanitising liquid, so as this starts to ferment and bubble and create oxygen, CO2, then it'll blow off through the pipe there. So that's all good. And before we do that, we're going to pitch the yeast. Now this is the starter I made a few days ago. It's been out for about 4 hours now, so hopefully it should be up to room temperature. We're just going to double check it with the, again, sanitised solution. We're going to pop the thermostat in there just to double check the temperature. And that's sitting on around about 22, which is good, not a problem. We're going to take a lot of that liquid out, give it a good shake to get the yeast back into out of suspension, and then dump it straight into the fermenter. I've got just enough there. Give that a good shake. Instantly you'll start to see the CO2 forming on the top. That gets the yeast out of suspension, and then all we're going to do is dump it straight into the beer, normally without dropping any. Lid goes on. Nice and tight. We've got a rubber stopper which forms a nice seal, and we put the rod in. That goes in like that. And the rod itself. So again, make sure it's nicely sanitised. Give it a quick rinse. Connect him up to our unit. And slide this baby in. In she goes. And sits on top like that. The blow off tube goes into the blow off valve. Make sure that's nice and tight. And all you need to do now is hook the power up, and we're ready to go. So guys, thanks ever so much for watching. As I say, as my first video, I've really enjoyed doing it. I've had a good homebrew session this afternoon. We'll give it a couple of weeks. Hopefully I'll do a follow-up video on how this IPA turns out. But in the meantime, I'm just going to show off a little bit now. A brew that I did a couple of weeks ago, and after all that work this afternoon, there's nothing better than pouring your own pint, and cheers.